Hello everyone and welcome to another Commander Tactics Deck Tech. My name's Pope. In today's video we're going to be revisiting the Kroxa Titan of Death's Hunger budget deck that we released a few weeks ago, removing all limitations and creating a bigger, better, faster, and more rage-inducing deck than ever before. If you haven't seen the original deck tech, you can click the pip up in the top right hand corner right now to watch it, or go check it out after this video to get an idea of the range and movement that will be occurring here today. I won't be doing an entire deck tech breakdown in this video, but instead going over the upgrades that we're going to be adding to better our foundation. If you aren't familiar with Kroxa, he's a 6/6 Elder Giant costing only a black and a red. If we don't escape him from our graveyard, then he is sacrificed on entry. And when he enters the battlefield or attacks, each of our opponents is going to have to discard a card. If an opponent discards a land or nothing, they take 3 points of damage. And of course, he can escape for double black and double red and exiling 5 other cards from our yard. The first thing we're going to do to better this uncaged freak show of a deck is soup up the power and potency of all of our discard spells and effects. Next, we're going to add in a not so subtle reanimation theme to bring back the best of the spells that we've already cast and the ones that we've discarded along the way. And lastly, we have added in multiple new win combos to help us secure the victory and send our opponents packing. And with all the sweet sauce that we've added to this deck, the cost of it has jumped from $65 to closer to $600. This deck is locked and loaded, so let's dive in now, taking a look at all the new discard spells that we've added to continue the pain train, kicking things off with 2 Planeswalkers, Lilianas of the Veil and Angrath the Flame Chained. Each of these are going to help us empty our opponent's hands very quickly. Lilianas of the Veil only casting 3 mana comes down with 3 loyalty, and for her +1, we get to make each player discard a card. For -2, we can make a target player sacrifice a creature, and then if we do get her up to 6 loyalty, we can hit that ultimate and separate all permanents a target player controls into 2 piles. Then that player sacrifices all of the permanents in one of the piles and gets to keep the rest. And then Angrath the Flame Chained for 5 mana, we get this big, beefy Minotaur for +1, each opponent discards a card and loses 2 life, or for -3, we can gain control of a target creature until the end of turn. We untap it, it gains haste, and then we sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step if its converted mana cost was less than 3. And if we are able to get to his ultimate, each opponent's going to lose life equal to the number of the cards in their graveyard, but that is a long shot. Next up, we have 3 of the most iconic red spells with Wheel of Fortune, Reforge the Soul, and Winds of Change. Each of these cards doing almost the exact same thing, but Wheel of Fortune, an icon in Magic's history. I love this DCI promo. It says, each player discards his or her hand and draws 7. Such an insane effect, not only allowing us to refuel our hand, but also giving our opponents more cards for us to make them discard. Reforge the Soul has a miracle of 1 in a red, but it says each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. And then of course, Winds of Change. Each player counts the cards in his or her hand, shuffles them into his or her deck, and draws that many cards. While Winds of Change isn't going to make our opponents discard cards, it is going to help us make sure that we have the right answers and the right spells to play when we need them. And then next up, we have 2 more sorceries in black this time, really going to help us disrupt the board with Sickening Dreams and Raven's Crime. Sickening Dreams, an insane sorcery. As an additional cost to play this, we discard X cards from our hand, and this spell is going to deal X damage to each creature and each player. Sickening Dreams comes as a 2-use card. If we need to use it as a board wipe, we can early on, assuming we have the cards to discard. But late game, if we're able to fill our hand up to astronomical numbers, we can discard all those cards, and if we have the most life, we're just going to win the game. And Raven's Crime, this sorcery costing only 1 black, has Retrace, so we can actually cast this card from our graveyard by discarding a land card, in addition to paying its normal black mana. Raven's Crime forces any player to discard a card. Now, us being able to discard a land card has advantages for us because we want to fill up our yard. If we're flooding, we want to be able to discard that land and use Raven's Crime to benefit off of it. Both of these spells extremely powerful and extremely cheap on the wallet. Coming up next, with all the spells that we're going to be dumping into our graveyard, we definitely want to have access to bring creatures back and recast our best spells. And that's why we're going to be running 2 more spells allowing us to do that with Yawgmoth's Will and Past in Flames. Underworld Breach is already in this deck, but with all 3 of these, we are going to be able to dig deep into our graveyard, recast those spells, and be able to just go off. Yawgmoth's Will is maybe the most expensive card in the deck. Until the end of your turn, you can play cards from your graveyard as though they were in your hand, and then cards that would be put into the graveyard this turn are removed from the game instead. With a full yard and a Yawgmoth's Will in play, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to just win the game with all of our mana production we can get from the rituals and other spells in our graveyard. And Past in Flames is going to do the same thing, but only for our instants and sorceries, and it has flashback. So the flashback cost is going to be equal to its mana cost. And then if we want to cast Past in Flames again down the road, it itself has flashback, allowing us to reach back in and cast those spells over and over. Then we have our spells that are going to help us bring back all of our big threats with the Dance of the Dead, Animate Dead, and Reanimate. I'm going to spare you the time reading Dance of the Dead. It is just Animate Dead, but with slightly different wording. When we cast Dance of the Dead or Animate Dead, again, they're the same spell, basically. We get to choose a target creature card in our graveyard. That creature card comes back to the field with this enchantment attached to it. Then, should the enchantment be removed or the creature be removed, both of them will go to the graveyard. We'll be talking a little bit more about these in the next section, but we also are running the sorcery Reanimate for only 1 black. We get to bring a creature card back from any graveyard onto the battlefield under our control for paying its CMC with our life. If we discard something early with a huge CMC and we can reanimate it on turn 2, turn 3, we will have a huge advantage over the rest of the board. And you better believe there are lots of great targets in this deck for reanimate. And then lastly, we have a couple more black spells to help us meddle with our graveyard. The old original Chainer, Dimension Master, and Buried Alive. Chainer, Dimension Master, costing 5 mana, gives all of our nightmares +1/+1. Then for triple black and 3 life, we get to put a creature card from any graveyard into play under our control. That creature is black and is a nightmare in addition to its other types. And whenever Chainer leaves the battlefield, we remove all nightmares from the game. Reanimation on a stick, capable of pulling from our opponent's graveyards as well. And you better believe they're going to be discarding a lot, so we can get some big value there. And the last card I've added, Buried Alive, for 2 and a black. This sorcery, a mainstay in reanimation decks. Search our library for up to 3 creature cards, put them into our graveyard, and then shuffle our library. Buried Alive in this deck can absolutely help us find win conditions that we want to reanimate and put them into our yard, making it a game set. But to ensure we have enough gas in the tank, we have also added a few combos to help us win the game on the spot if we are able to put the pieces together, starting things off with Sir Conrad the Grim and Necropotence. If you're not familiar with either of these cards, Sir Conrad has a lot of text, but he says whenever another creature dies, is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or leaves the graveyard, Sir Conrad is going to deal 1 damage to each opponent. And if we want, we can pay 1 in a black to make each player put the top card of their library into their graveyard. And Necropotence, the extremely powerful enchantment costing triple black, says skip our draw step. Whenever you discard a card, you then exile that card from your graveyard. So this means the card is going to go to the graveyard and then instantly leave the graveyard. But it also says pay 1 life. Exile the top card of your library face down, put that card into your hand at the beginning of your next end step. Paying life for card advantage is a huge busted mechanic in the game of Magic, and Necropotence is at the forefront of that ability. The way this combo plays out goes something like this. With Sir Conrad and Necropotence on the field, we're going to activate Necropotence down to a health total that you believe can kill all your opponents and not risk you getting killed by outside damage. This is most likely going to be somewhere between 25 and 35. When you activate Necropotence, you will remove from your deck the top, let's say 30 cards, and then add them to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. At the start of the end step, we will now have a hand of more than 30 cards, and we will have to discard it down to 7. This is again assuming it is our turn. This all has to take place on your turn. For each creature card that we discard, we will be pinging our opponents for 2 health thanks to Conrad. When a creature card goes from our hand to the graveyard, that's going to do 1 damage, and whenever we exile that card from our graveyard, it'll do an additional damage. This deck list isn't super creature heavy, so if you do enjoy this combo and want to give it a try, you can just simply add in a couple more creatures and be ready to go. And as a last side note, with infinite mana, Conrad is a win condition in himself. And if we have Bojuka Bog in hand with Conrad in play, we can win if an opponent has enough creatures in their yard to let us devour all of our opponents. If you do have any comments or questions about this combo, please feel free to post them down below this video and I will be happy to get around to answer them. Our next combo is a classic one, and that is World Gorger Dragon with Animate Dead. World Gorger Dragon, if you're not familiar with this guy, whenever he enters the battlefield, we exile all other permanents we control. That includes everything, lands, everything. When World Gorger Dragon leaves the battlefield, we're going to return those cards to the battlefield under our control. With World Gorger Dragon in the yard, we can reanimate it using Dance of the Dead or Animate Dead. You can't do this combo with Reanimation or Chainer, so don't make that mistake, otherwise it just will end instantly. When the enchantments bring back World Gorger Dragon, the ETB from World Gorger Dragon takes place, exiling the enchantment, forcing us to sacrifice the creature and get our entire board back. And we are back to where we started, but with untapped mana. Then we are able to continuously blink all of our permanents, creating infinite mana and infinite enter the battlefield effects. We can then dump all that mana into, say, Sir Conrad himself or our commander and win the game on the spot. A very easy combo to assemble and relatively cheap on the wallet as well. And lastly, we have the pesky Goblin Shaman, that is Kiki Jiki. Kiki Jiki combos are abundant and he can work so well with many other creatures in this deck. But for our winning plays, we're going to use Kiki Jiki along with Combat Celebrant or Zealous Conscripts. Kiki Jiki can be tapped to create a token that's a copy of a target non-legendary creature we control. The token has haste and we sacrifice it at the next end step. In conjunction with Combat Celebrant, who when exerted gives us an additional attack step, or Zealous Conscripts, who can be used to create infinite tokens of Zealous Conscripts, we get infinite combat steps with infinite tokens, or infinite tokens of Zealous Conscripts, essentially leaving us with the same result, and that is infinite combat damage through tokens. This combo is also really easy to assemble thanks to all of our reanimation and the ability to play our spells from our graveyard. Along with all the amazing spells previewed, we also did add many more. Let's take a look at what else is inside the 99. We are replacing 44 total cards from this deck. There are several lands that we've changed out, but mostly it is going to be combo pieces, big creatures, mana rocks, and a few tutors. The cards marked in green are your big ticket items, so if you're looking to upgrade this deck but don't want to really spend too much money, these are the ones you could look for to steer away from. And then winning with this version of the deck, looking a little bit different, but first and foremost, we are going to use Kroxa to continue to badger our opponents, make them discard and lose life. If that doesn't work, we're going to use our reanimators, bringing back our big, humongous threats, or using it with cards like World Gorger Dragon to combo off and win games on the spot. We do have many outs in this deck, so always be looking for new ways to close the game out whenever you're sitting at the table. But that does bring us to the end of the show. This deck is fully equipped to run with just about any playgroup and can take down many games in the process. I always love to push decks to the limits and see what kind of madness we can create. I should comment that I did not build this deck with the intentions of competing in the CEDH pools. It is considerably stronger than your average level 5 or level 6 deck, but would have a tough time standing up against your most powerful competitive decks. Kroxa is a madman, and I have loved playing him at my LGS. I do find myself constantly tweaking and editing the deck, still trying to find that right mesh of discard and power. But there are just too many cards to pick from, so let me know what you guys think. Are there some I missed? What would you add into this unrestricted budget? Drop it down in the comments below or send us a tweet at EDH Tactics. We're always active over there and posting random good stuff. If you're new to the channel, thanks so much for checking us out, and if you're a regular here, then thanks so much for coming back. If you guys enjoyed this deck tech and exploring this commander a little more, make sure you hit that mother flippin' like button. New deck techs every Friday. Subscribe if you love them. Thanks for watching. See you guys for the next one.